We have so much data. We have customer data. We have metadata on our content. We have website data, social data. There's first-party data, second-party data, third-party data. I want to know who's throwing all these parties and why am I not invited? Now, because we have all this data, we have to figure out how to get it to talk to each other. And now we're spending all of our time integrating our data sources. And what does that give us? Even more data. Thanks a lot. To make sense of this, we have to boil it up, and that's where dashboards come in. And dashboards are helpful, but every tool has its own dashboard. So now we're stuck building dashboards of dashboards to boil up what we just boiled up. And the other problem with dashboards is that they're only looking at the past, and they don't really tell us why things happened. So we turn to analytical suites, CDPs, DMPs, CRMs, OMG, TMI. We're obsessed with big data, but we're spending way too much time in our data rather than on our data. The next thing you know, another year goes by, and we've spent all of our efforts figuring out which data to buy, hooking it up to other sources, and building out dashboards. We want the holy grail. We want data and technology to tell us exactly what new products to launch, what new audiences to build, and how we can best optimize all our sales and marketing efforts. And all of these tools, all these vendors, all these technologies, all these dashboards, they're supposed to get us better results faster. But have they? Maybe there's another way. Maybe we're on the quest for the wrong thing. Maybe instead of buying yet another data source, figuring out how to set up yet another dashboard, licensing another analytical suite, we need to take a giant step back. Let's explore what happens when we ask ourselves the transformational question, what exactly are we looking for? We're going to start by stepping outside our industry for just a minute to talk about this guy, Brian Dunn. In 2004, he is riding high. He's the CEO of Best Buy, which is a consumer electronics retailer in the US, kind of like MediaMarkt here in Germany. And he was just named Company of the Year by Forbes magazine. Everything was going well until this little company called Amazon.com came along and fundamentally changed how consumers shop for electronics. It's called showrooming, and we're probably all guilty of it in this room. You go to a retailer, you look around, you try out the equipment, you maybe talk to the sales associate, only to go home and buy it online. Or even worse, take your phone out of the store and buy it right in front of the sales associate's face. So anyways, Brian is trying to figure out what to do, but his data is an absolute mess. He has the point of sale system, he has an inventory system, an online system, an offline system, a customer database, and he just can't make heads or tails of it. He decides then he's just going to trust his intuition. He has these dashboard reports, they don't mean anything to him, so he's just going to say, you know what, I've been successful, I'm going to figure this out, trusting my gut. So he launches something called the Best Buy mobile app. Total failure. Then he says, okay, what if we built an API? Maybe there's some software engineers that want to hook into the Best Buy system. Another total failure. Then he has this great idea for something called Appalicious, which, to this day, I have no idea what it means. All of these things cost hundreds of millions of dollars. The share price plummets by 81%, and Brian Dunn gets fired by the board. Now, at the same time, there's this guy, Ed Wade, and he is the general manager of an American baseball team known as the Houston Astros. The Houston Astros at this time, a very mediocre team. I know baseball is not huge here in Europe, but winning or losing about 80 games is average. You're not going to win any championships doing that. And Ed is like, all right, I need to figure this out. I see all these other teams are starting to use data to build better teams, but I'm literally getting a lot of my facts from a fax machine. That there's people out on the road handwriting reports on players and faxing them into Ed. And it's like, I don't have data, but I need to find a way to improve this team. We have to break through our mediocrity. He decides to look at what the other big money teams are doing. He says, if they can figure it out, they're doing well, maybe I can study their strategies and just copy it. He looked at the teams like the New York Yankees, Chicago Cubs, Los Angeles Dodgers, These are the big teams, as in football, maybe it's like Real Madrid, Manchester United, those types of big, huge teams. He's looking at these teams saying, okay, what are they doing? And he realizes they're all fighting over the fastest fastball pitchers. Now, if you're not a baseball fan, a pitcher is the guy who throws the ball. And so everyone was fighting over the guys who could throw the ball the fastest. It was as simple as that. Now, the problem is when you're competing against these big money teams, you always lose the auctions. So Ed could never get the best fastball pitchers, the fastest fastball pitchers on his team. But he says, there's got to be something here, so I'm going to try my best. I'm going to sign not an elite fastball pitcher, but an above average one. And he pays 5 times the league's average salary to acquire someone named Brandon Lyon. Total failure. He went on to lose 106 games that year, which was the worst record in baseball, and actually the worst record for the Houston Astros in their entire history. Let's go back to Best Buy and figure out what happened after they fired Brian Dunn. They hired this guy, Hubert Joly. He says, okay, enough with these dashboard reports. I'm throwing them in the trash. And we need to make sense of our data. And the best way to do that is come up with some theories and hypotheses on ways we can figure out how to compete given this trend of showrooming. He puts together a team and they say, okay, what are our theories? What are our hypotheses? What can we do? And they come up with this idea. They think we're not going to be able to change showrooming. This is just a new trend and we can't fight it. All our competitors are trying to do something. They're trying to become the Amazon, doing stupid things like Appalicious. We know that doesn't work. But what if we could prove with our data that if we put an item on display in one of our stores, more units of that product would sell worldwide? Not necessarily in the 4 walls of a Best Buy, but somewhere online, somewhere else. And this data, if proven true, would be hugely valuable because he could go to all the equipment manufacturers like Sony or Samsung and say, hey, pay us money, we'll put you in our store, and we can prove to you definitively that you'll sell more units. You'll sell more TVs, more computers, whatever. So the team goes to the data, and this plays out as accurate. So he goes to all his big vendors, the Sonys and Samsungs, and says, hey, guess what? We're no longer in the consumer retail business. We're in the showrooming business. And if you want your products on display in our stores, you're going to have to pay big money. And the vendors were all excited about it, actually, because they bought the data. They said, that's a great analysis. We see it. We see the value. And in fact, if you've ever been into a Best Buy store in the United States recently, you can see the store is completely laid out by brand now. So it used to be organized functionally. You had the CDs over here and the TVs over there, the computers over there. Now it's organized by brand, because these brands have paid big money to be part of the showroom. You even get hit over the head with brands before you walk in the doors to the store, promoting some of their premium brands. As a result, the share price went up almost 6 times under Hubert Joly. And this is usually surprising because most people assume retailers are in big trouble, but not Best Buy. They're doing quite well. Let's go back to the baseball example. After the Astros fire Ed Wade, they hired this guy, Jeff Luhnow. And he said, all right, I need to figure out something to do. I need to figure out how the heck can I break through mediocrity given that I don't have the same budget as everyone else? He goes to a conference, a sabermetrics conference. This is a bunch of people get together and share data about baseball. I did check, the movie Moneyball did technically make it to Europe. It didn't do very well at the box office, but maybe some of you have seen the movie. It's with Brad Pitt. It's called Moneyball. That's sabermetrics. It's using data to do a better job with picking and coaching your players. And at this conference, there's a company, a Danish company called TrackMan. And they've developed this new technology that can capture 24,000 data points per second. So if you do the math, an average game is about 3 hours. There's 162 games a year, 30 teams. We're talking about trillions of data points. How do you make sense of that? And this guy's on stage. He's getting a little technical, a little geeky. He's explaining what a curveball is. Now, curveball, the analogy, I guess, in football would be bend it like Beckham. That's my limited knowledge there. But a curveball, instead of going fast, it bends while it's in the air. So it's hard for the batter to hit it because he doesn't know where it's going to go. So this guy's on stage, he's explaining the physical properties of curveballs. He said the higher the spin rate, the more the curveball will curve. And there's a very simple formula here. You can figure out how effective your spin is going to be. Now, most people in the audience are thinking, who the heck is this data geek on stage? You know, we're former players. We've been in this business for 40 years. Of course we know the best pitchers are the best fastball pitchers. This guy's telling us that they have data to show something else. They have data to show that there was one number that was more predictive to success than speed on a fastball, and it's spin rate on a curveball. Most people just ignored the speech altogether, except for this guy. Jeff's like, maybe there's something here. If no one else is paying attention to this, maybe that's an opportunity for me. Jeff goes back, he builds a new database system called Ground Control. He hired someone from NASA, literally a rocket scientist, to crunch the numbers. And they figured out that, yes, it is true that all else equal, if someone can spin the ball with a high spin rate, they're going to be a more effective pitcher. He asked a good question of the data. He knew exactly what he was looking for. And what he ended up doing is he went out and actually was able to sign 4 of the very best curveball pitchers for $12 million, which was $3 million less than what they used to pay Brandon Lyon. So 4 people for less than the price of one guy who wasn't very good. And if you follow baseball, you maybe know how the story ends. The Astros go on to win the World Series, the World Championship in 2017, and a lot of people say, hey, it's because Jeff didn't listen to the common wisdom, went outside the echo chamber, and went and found these curveball pitchers. What can we learn from these 2 stories and bring it back to our world in media? When we are confused by our data, if we're overwhelmed by our data, if we feel like we don't have any data, we can fall into one of 2 traps. One trap we saw with Best Buy is just roll the dice and guess at what we think is going to happen. The second trap we saw with Ed Wade and the Houston Astros, let's just look around and copy the strategy of our competitors, which is a losing fight given that your competitors may have more money than you, especially they did for Ed Wade. Inspired by the spin rate story, we've come up with something called Spin. And Spin is something that Hubert Joly and Jeff Luhnow found. Spin is a simple insight validated by data that no one else is paying attention to. Spin comes from asking good questions, then using data to find or validate a simple insight. Leaders who use their spin create predictably positive growth outcomes for their organizations. Why did this work for Hubert Joly, and what can we learn from him? Don't just react blindly to change. The old CEO was just guessing at what should happen. He was trying to take Amazon on head-on, didn't work. Let your competitors fight the disruptors in the industry. And most of those competitors to Best Buy are actually out of business now. They spent all their resources trying to become the next Amazon.com and failed because they're not. Joly didn't try to change a trend, he adapted to it instead. And once he found this insight and backed it up with data, he acted confidently. It could have backfired on him, right? The equipment manufacturers could have told him to take a hike. No, we're not paying those higher fees. But because he was so confident, backed up with all the data, it was a successful strategy. His spin was if an item was on display at a Best Buy store, more units of that product would sell worldwide. And for Jeff, what worked there? He stopped following the herd. He suspended disbelief and looked outside the echo chamber, and he used data in a way that no one else was paying attention to. Now, I do have one confession to make. I was the data geek on the stage back there at the conference. A little bit more about me. I've always loved this intersection of data and media. It's really my passion. So I started a team 3 years ago, and this is all we focus on. We help publishers make sense of all their data and find their spin. And this concept of spin came up when we were researching for a book that we published last year. We worked with about 36 publishers directly and researched and analyzed 300 more and found 5 things that publishers do well to grow their revenues online. So actually, if you're interested in a copy of the book and you give me your card and write book on it at some point, I'll send you an email with how to get an ebook version of it for free. Let's bring it back to media now. We had some examples from outside our industry. We can learn from those models, but let's spend the rest of today's session figuring out how we can avoid the fates of Brian Dunn and Ed Wade and find our spin just like Hubert Joly and Jeff Luhnow did. And remember, spin is a simple insight validated by data that no one else is paying attention to. This is Kathy Dutton Bush. She's the publisher of New England Home Magazine. Very traditional publishing business model. Pretty much, they go out, they figure out who the wealthiest people are in New England, they produce this beautiful magazine, they send the magazine to the wealthy people free of charge, and make all their money on print advertising. I don't have to tell anyone in this room, that model is extremely challenged. But Kathy and her team worked really, really hard. It's a little bit like deja vu. Every year is kind of the same, but just harder because they have to make all these cuts to keep the budgets aligned. So everyone's just working harder, doing the same thing, but with fewer people. The team's feeling a little burnt out, but they've been miraculously able to keep revenues about the same, or keep profits about the same. Kathy was kind of proud of that. At one board meeting, she was kind of proud about the fact, hey, look around, all of these businesses are failing, but we're able to stay balanced. And one of the owners says, hey, Kathy, we appreciate all the hard work that you and your team have done, but continuing to cut costs and work harder is not a long-run strategy. What's your plan? How are we going to stay ahead of the curve? And unfortunately, Kathy didn't really have an answer. She was so busy. She had no team. She was doing all this work. She had no time to think about strategy. So unfortunately, she was like a deer in the headlight, and I don't know. I'll get back to you, boss. I'll get back to you. Kathy goes away and says, okay, I need to figure out a strategy. I see this company housed. They seem to be doing pretty well, but I need to find a way to find new revenue streams. I can't be so relying on advertising. She's like, well, what if I look at the data and figure out maybe I could create new products, some new reader revenue streams, and go from there? And she looks at the data, kind of assuming that she just wanted to find which of the rich homeowners were the most likely to buy something from the magazine. But when we crunched the numbers, we found a big surprise. These people didn't care. They didn't even know the name of the magazine that they'd been receiving for free for years. The engaged segment in Kathy's audience, she found, were the local tradespeople, the local businesses that were involved in architecture, design, construction. They were the people that were very, very engaged. They were proactively asking for copies of the magazine, opening all the emails that they sent out, and also visiting all the links online. What did Kathy do? She's like, okay, I think I have something here. Let me try to build this audience and see what happens. She creates a newsletter focused only on the trade. So it's not for the rich homeowner. It's targeted at local mom and pop, small business, small entrepreneurs who have design, architecture, or construction businesses. And they have unique needs. They have to figure out pricing and HR and networking. And she puts together a newsletter for them. And it doubles the total number of names she has on her file within just 1 month, because she was focusing on this new audience that actually really cared about the content that she was delivering. So she decides, based on that, let's launch some new revenue streams. So she launched a membership. People could join. They get access to a series of events, premium content, webinars, et cetera. And now she can confidently attend board meetings, letting people know she is ahead of the curve. What can we learn from Kathy and bring it back to our own businesses? Play offense, not defense. Don't wait for your boss or a colleague or a board member to ask you that tough question. We know change is all around us. Be proactive. And to look for new ideas, it all starts with focusing on your very best, most engaged audience members. And if you haven't looked at the data to figure out who they are, I highly encourage you to go back and figure that out, because there's a lot of anecdotal stories at a lot of publishers. We think these are our best customers, but the data may surprise you. Then once you figure out who your best customers are, create products and services that meet their needs. Kathy's spin, the people who actually value and use our content are the local small business professionals, not the wealthy homeowners. This is David Stevens from the Capital Changes Report. It's a print publication that tells accountants what companies were bought and sold that year so they can figure out what to do with that data. And David was hired. Let's turn around this declining print business. We're in big trouble. We need a smart guy. David's a very smart, hardworking, motivated guy. So David, the future of the company is riding on you. Figure out what we can do about our declining revenue for this Capital Changes Report. David goes away and starts thinking, okay, what could I do? What could I do? He goes to his boss and says, all right, I have an idea. What if we created an online version of the report? We may be able to reach more people that way. His boss says, no, David, that's going to cannibalize our core business. So David's a little annoyed, but he's new, rolling with the punches. He comes back with another idea. Hey, boss, what if we launched segmented versions of the report? So smaller reports, and then we could target specific communities differently. No, David, that's going to cannibalize our core product. So David's getting a little frustrated. The only thing he could get through was a PDF version. Very high tech here. A PDF version of the report was the most his boss would concede. David's getting very frustrated at this point. Why the heck did I take this job? I'm banging my head up against a brick wall. Maybe some of us have had jobs like that. Why the heck did you bother hiring me if you're not going to listen to any of my ideas? So David said, you know what, I'm going to do this one last attempt here, but I'm going to be very data-driven. I'm going to go look at the data and prove to my boss that what we're going to do is going to work. So he looks at the data, and he's looking at a lot of the customer survey results and a lot of the usage data, and he's finding out that almost all of the readers are using the report in the same way. They're leafing through the report and building an Excel spreadsheet to calculate how much taxes they owe based on what was bought and sold that year. He said, wait a minute. Why are we making our customers go through this terrible process where you have to, first of all, you have to find in a paper report the company that you bought or sold, and then you have to transpose that number into Excel. You might make a mistake. And the good news is everyone's Excel spreadsheet was exactly the same because the government tells you what taxes to pay. There's a formula. So what if we go out and we build some software? And instead of leafing through this report, all you have to do is type in the companies that you bought and sold, and we'll generate this Excel spreadsheet for you. He goes to his boss, and his boss says, sorry, David, no, that will cannibalize our core business. At this point, David is fed up, and he goes, I'm tired of hearing this. Who cares about cannibalization of a low-margin, declining product? I'm not encouraging you all to yell at your boss, but this did work for David. Finally, the boss is like, all right, you're next on the line, but we'll try it. He goes out, he hires a software company to build, an agency to build the software, and he's pretty confident. It's a part of his research. He did say, okay, what is the willingness to pay for this thing? He launches it. It lived up to all of his expectations. He actually found that not only was adoption really high, but subscribers were willing to pay 10 to 15 times as much as they were for the paper report. And it makes sense because it's way easier to use the software than to leaf through all those papers. So huge success, met all of his launch benchmarks. He goes on to launch this product in other markets. So big companies, small companies, debt market, equity market, international, and within 3 years, this is a $40 million business. What can we learn about this? Don't worry about cannibalizing a low-margin, declining product. I don't think that's a problem for the people at this summit, but we probably know people at other conferences who maybe sometimes fall into that trap. Cut out steps of the process for your end users. Think about delivering a final solution rather than just raw input. And when you find a winner, repeat that magical formula, just like David did when he said, hey, it works in this market, we're going to launch internationally, we're going to go to debt markets, we're going to go to smaller markets. His spin was everyone was using the data in the same way to calculate their tax liability. Now let's go to Vermont in the United States to meet Brad Ring. He's the owner of Bat and Kill Communication, which publishes a bunch of different magazines focused on consumer enthusiast niches. One of them is Brew Your Own Magazine. It's all about how to make beer in your basement. Sounds fun, right? So company's moderately successful. It's a bit of a lifestyle business for him. It's doing okay. But then all of a sudden he realizes the print advertising is way, way, way down. It's really hard to find new print subscribers. He used direct mail a lot. Direct mail, as we all know, is way more expensive and less efficient in many cases. And personally, he had to start putting his daughters through college. And as we heard from an earlier speaker, it is not cheap to send people to college in the United States. So he said, I need to turn this business around for my family, and also I just don't want to go out of business. So he falsely hoped earlier this decade the iPad would magically save him, that because there's this new technology called the iPad, that everyone's going to love magazines again. And unfortunately, we learned that that's not true, that there's maybe a small 2 or 3% bump one time when they got popular, but that really didn't save the business. So Brad's like, all right, we need to go to the data. And he said, I want to build some sort of online membership program, but I'm not sure exactly what to do here. So let's go to the data and figure it out. And his original hunch was, I think we could build something for beginners, that people are trying to get into this hobby, they can come here and figure out, how to start brewing beer in the basement. But that was not what we found in the data. In fact, those people were least engaged with his content out of all the people that we looked at. The people that were truly engaged with Brew Your Own were people that were intermediate in their skill levels. They'd been making their own beer for at least 2 years, not more than 10 years, because people above 10 years felt like they didn't have any information needs. And this group that was very engaged were very technical in nature. They were engineers, chemists, accountants by day, making their own beer in their basement by night. So what's next? Brad's like, okay, so I figured out who I think will actually pay us money to be part of a membership. What's part of the membership? And as part of this research and looking at the data, he said, here's the problem. These people are pretty advanced, they're pretty technical, and they get really frustrated when they have a technical problem in their brewing process, and they try to use Google for an answer. Because they'll find some bozo with a blog or some idiot with a YouTube video who doesn't know anything about chemistry and gives bad advice. So what if Brew Your Own magazine could take their 20 years of archives, which had technical answers to technical questions, and turn it into basically a Google for their members? I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that trademark there, but anyway. So he goes out, he builds this membership program. Of course, as part of a membership, you get access to all the content, but you also get to search this database with technical questions, and once a month, there's a live Q&A with one of the editors. As a result, Brad's online revenues go up by a factor of 7 in the first year. And he wasn't done there. He's like, we have to keep going. Now, next year will be good because we'll have some renewals, but I just don't want to take my foot off the gas here. I want to keep growing. Where can we look for more potential members? And the good news is now we know what a good potential member looks like from all the initial data analysis. And it turns out that international was a huge growth opportunity for Brad, that in fact, in year 2, it doubled again in year 2, and a third of that growth came from looking outside the United States. What can we learn from Brad and Brew Your Own? First of all, don't assume a new technology is going to magically save your business, like the iPad. Instead, really, it comes back to focusing on your very best users and creating a product that solves a real pain point for them. It's only going to be in the data that you can see who your best users are and what they care about. And then once you have something that works, go find more of these people in other markets. The technology and the data is there to do so. Brad's spin was intermediate to advanced homebrewers around the world need a reliable, on-demand source of answers to technical questions. Now let's talk about Linda Longton from Randall Riley. Randall Riley publishes magazines in the trucking industry. And trucking is not an industry you want to be in. No one wants to be a truck driver anymore. And I don't blame them. It's lonely. Long hours, it's dangerous, and there's this threat that self-driving vehicles will make it irrelevant anyway. Most of the advertisers for Randall Riley are recruiting companies. It's a big problem for trucking companies because they can't figure out how to get more truck drivers. And it looks like the only people that the industry is focused on are 50 to 60-year-old men. These are the only people that have their licenses, and these are all the people that all the trucking magazines are fighting over their eyeballs. So there's several trucking magazines, very competitive, but a very limited audience size, a very fixed audience size. And there's lots of other affinity groups to target this population, by the way. It's a very clear demographic. So there's lots of competition. And poor Linda, she's trying to figure out how to grow the business, and she's very enthusiastic and motivated, and ambitious, and she comes to events like these and goes back with lots of great ideas, but she tries tactic after tactic. Let's add some video, let's do more on social, and really, best case scenario, she's just treading water. She decides it's time to go to the data. And she said, you know what? We're all fighting over the same population, the same group of 50 to 60-year-old men. There has to be another audience out there who's interested in the content that we're delivering. We're just not paying attention to it because we're focused on common wisdom that it's this group of 50 to 60-year-old men. She cranks out the data and finds that there's a secret segment within her data, within her audience. Female truck drivers. Now, it wasn't a big percentage of her audience, but they were super engaged, opening every email, clicking on all the links, requesting more copies of the magazine. And she's like, wait a minute, we're literally ignoring 51% of the population here as an industry. This should have been a no-brainer, and we have the data to back it up. But of course, trucking industry is a little traditional, focused on male-dominated, so she had a little bit of a tough time selling this to her boss. But she did have the data to back it up, and that really helped her launch a newsletter called She Drives Trucks. And this was a test. Hey, if we can build this audience called She Drives Trucks, maybe there are other reader revenue streams we could launch. Within 3 months, she gets 10,000 people to sign up for She Drives Trucks, and that gave her and her boss the confidence to go out and start launching membership programs, event businesses, and training programs targeted explicitly at female truck drivers. Huge success, and she finally stopped feeling so frustrated, trying tactic after tactic to focus on the same group of people that everyone else was fighting over. Why did it work? She stopped chasing tactics, and she did what all these other protagonists did, is she looked at her data. And specifically, the question she was asking of her data is, who is this hidden segment? There's got to be a group of people in our data that no one else is paying attention to, but we know that they're very engaged. And when she found that, she first built out that audience through a free newsletter, and then found a way to monetize it through creating products, services, trainings, et cetera, to niche her niche. Her spin: female truck drivers represent a substantial growth opportunity, and they have unique content needs. All 4 of these people found their spin, that simple insight, validated by data that no one else was paying attention to. Remember this formula from earlier in the presentation? I have a new version. It's much easier. Spin really is uniqueness plus simplicity divided by uncertainty. So when you're asking questions of your data, think about what is something that no one else is looking at that adds to your uniqueness. Think about something that's easy to implement. It can't be too complicated. We can't have 20,000 different segments. It might be too complicated, so simple is important. And then back it up with the data, and that will reduce the uncertainty. And I know this group is going to be extremely successful in finding their spin. We have amazing first-party data. Every other industry is salivating over the level of data that we have, and now it's all about how we can put this data to use. We also have the technology. There are tons of vendors here. There are other vendors. The technology is there. Just let's make sure we're licensing the right thing so we can ask the right questions of our data and take the right actions based on what the technology tells us. Remember, don't go straight to the tactic. We're all going to leave here with lots of great notes about tactics that worked for other media companies. And they may work for your business, they may not. I would just say be a little bit critical about what may or may not work for your audience, for your product, for your specific industry. Let's all stop chasing the trends and start chasing insights. So the next time someone on your team comes with you with a new idea, or a new request for more data, or a new request for more of a dashboards or analytical suite, don't immediately say, yes, I love it, we're going to do it. And don't immediately tell them, no, it'll cannibalize our core business. Take a step back and probe, what is the spin? And in doing so, you'll get to spend way more time on your data rather than in it. Thank you.